If you have recently purchased pre-constructed Commander decks released along with Innistrad Midnight Hunt and are looking to upgrade the decks with a budget in mind, this video will be the right one for you. In this video, I am going to introduce 10 cards, 5 cards for each deck, that will potentially add more value to both decks. An important note though, each of these cards will cost US $10 and under, since this is specifically for the budget conscious. Let's first look at the Dimir deck and its commander Wilhelt, the Rod Cleaver. Wilhelt is a 3/3 zombie warrior which costs 2 generic, 1 blue, and 1 black mana to cost. Its rule text reads, whenever another zombie you control dies, if it didn't have Decayed, create a 2/2 black zombie creature with Decayed. At the beginning of your end step, you may sacrifice a zombie. If you do, draw a card. Wilhelt is the perfect combo enabler with Gravecrawler. At USD $9.99 in Star City Games RSCG, Gravecrawler has the ability to generate you infinite 2/2 zombies because you can cast Gravecrawler from the graveyard as long as you control a zombie, which is Wilhelt. To complete the combo, you will need a sacrifice outlet and a cost reducer. Thankfully for the cost reducer portion, the pre-con already includes Rooftop Storm, which lets you cast any zombie creature spell for free. For the sacrifice outlet, a simple Karen feeder which just costs USD 29 cents will do the trick. To start the combo, have Wilhelt, Rooftop Storm, and Karen feeder already on the battlefield. Cast Gravecrawler for free, sacrifice it to Karen feeder. You will add a +1/+1 counter to Karen feeder, Gravecrawler will go to the graveyard, and you will create a 2/2 black zombie token with Decayed. Now, cast Gravecrawler from the graveyard, then sacrifice it again to Karen feeder. Repeat this process as many times as you like. You will have as many tokens as you want, as well as an insanely huge Karen feeder. Now, the only trouble is that these tokens do not have haste, and you will have to wait one whole turn cycle just to swing them at your opponents. It might work, but you're also giving your opponents another turn to find an answer. Thankfully, the precon already comes with Diagraph Captain. If Diagraph Captain is on the board when you start a combo, every time you sacrifice Gravecrawler, you will ping an opponent for 1 life, and eventually you will be able to ping everyone down to 0 life. You can and you should add a similar card for some redundancy. The next card to add to the deck is Plague Belcher. At USD $4.99, Plague Belcher is a small upgrade to Diagraph Captain in my opinion because Plague Belcher costs 2 generic and 1 black instead of 1 generic, 1 blue and 1 black to cast. It has an almost similar triggered ability, except that each opponent loses 1 life each time you sacrifice Gravecrawler. The only downside is that you will have to add 2 -1/-1 counters to a target creature you control, but with Wilhelt on the board, it's likely you already have some zombie tokens to sacrifice. Since this deck has both black and blue colors, it will be a huge shame not to run any tutors and counter spells in this deck. After all, this is a combo deck. You will need to search for your combo pieces and protect your combo too. Unfortunately, this precon doesn't have any tutors or protection. While the color black has many powerful tutor spells in the game, you cannot go wrong with Diabolic Tutor for the budget conscious. The cheapest variant just costs USD 49 cents, and while this card requires 2 generic and 2 black mana to cast, it is a tutor nonetheless that can get you any card you want from your library. To protect your combos from any interactions from any opponent, a simple Arcane Denial which just costs USD $1.49 will do the trick. Arcane Denial costs just 1 generic mana and 1 blue mana, making it easier to cast compared to the classic counterspell. While the downside is that your opponent gets to draw 2 cards at the beginning of the next turn's upkeep. Guess what? If you are winning, there is no next turn for anyone. Now, let's look at the other Celestial deck with its commander Lenoir, Autumn Sovereign. Lenoir is a 0/4 human noble which costs 2 generic, 1 green and 1 white mana to cast. It has the new Coven ability which reads, at the beginning of a combat on your turn, put a +1/+1 counter up to 1 target creature you control. Then, if you control 3 or more creatures with different powers, draw a card. I am gonna be honest, Lenoir does not provide as much value as Wilhelt does in my opinion. The color pair of green and white is also not exactly the strongest combination in Magic. If you look at the rest of the precon deck list, the game plan is pretty straightforward. Cast creatures, put +1/+1 counters, swing at your opponents, draw some cards, and hopefully win the game. And here is the problem of the deck. Winning through combat is not the easiest feat in a game of Commander since you have 3 opponents who all each start with 40 life. Unless you're willing to spend money on green cards like Finale of Devastation and Critical Behemoth to win on your turn, it is very likely your opponents will be able to find some answers on their turns. It is still very possible to add some value to make your deck more threatening. I will start with protecting your creatures and commander. Let me introduce Shalai Voice of Plan B. At just USD $4.99, Shalai prevents a lot of things on your board from getting targeted by your opponents. While the precon already has Sigada Heron's Grace, Shalai protects all creatures and all planeswalkers. Shalai can even buff your whole board with +1/+1 counters if you have tons of mana and you have nothing to do with your mana. Do note though that both Shalai and Sigada will not protect your board from getting board wipe, but some protection is always better than none. Speaking of buffing your creatures with +1/+1 counters, you have to add the following cards: Evolution Sage, Hardened Scales, Cathars Crusade. All of these cards help you to add more +1/+1 counters to your creatures on the board in various manners. Evolution Sage costs USD 99 cents and allows you to proliferate every time you play a land. Hardened Scales costs USD 6.99 and adds an additional +1/+1 counter each time you put one or more +1/+1 counter on a creature you control. Cathars Crusade costs USD 4.99 and puts a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control every time a creature enters the battlefield under your control. If you can get all 3 cards out, your creatures are going to turn into huge threats pretty quickly, putting your opponents on a timer. Now, the last card I'm going to add into this deck is Eladamri's Core. Since the deck of Lenore relies on smacking your opponents, you have to get creatures out, and what better way to do it with a creature tilter. For just USD 5.99, it is an instant that searches and puts any creature card from your library into your hand. You can use it to search for Shalai or Sigada if you need any protection, or any of the creatures in the precon. And there you have it! I have introduced 10 cards that are all USD $10 and under, which will most probably add more value to these precons. These cards are of course not the only upgrades you can make. There are definitely way more options, especially if you have a larger budget. But hey, it's easier to start small and determine down the road if you are willing to spend more to upgrade your decks. With that, have a great day and I'll catch all of you next time.